Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Adult Chair on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and I am thrilled, as always, to be here with Michelle Chalfant. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Pete.
Are you excited about today?
I am so excited.
Enough about me. Let's talk about my podcast. That's right. We're talking about narcissism today.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, we have a fantastic guest to help us dive into these murky waters. I'm telling you, Michelle, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a psych undergrad from years and years ago. I have heard the word narcissism used more times in the last 3 weeks than I have my entire life. So this is a great and timely conversation to learn more about this topic. Before we dig in, head over to theadultchair.com, learn more about this show. You can subscribe for free by signing up to our mailing list or find us anywhere the finest podcasts are served. Join the conversation on Facebook or Twitter. We would love to hear from you. Don't forget, join that private Facebook group. It is growing and thriving, and we love all of the participation there. That's really where the interesting stuff is going on. So just head over to michellechalfant.com, scroll down a little bit. You'll find a link to the private Facebook group, and we'd love to approve your membership over there. Very, very easy to do. Okay, here we go. Ross Rosenberg is a counselor, a trainer, and author of the best-selling book, The Human Magnet Syndrome. He's also a prolific YouTube creator. His videos have been viewed over 5 million times. He is trained around the world and is regularly featured on national TV and radio. You can find him blogging for the Huffington Post, PsychCentral.com, and thegoodmenproject.com. And you can find him right here today. Ross Rosenberg, welcome to the Adult Chair.
Well, thank you. I am quite honored to be a guest.
Let's start with this conversation about narcissism. Michelle, I wonder if you could frame why briefly you wanted to talk about narcissism and have Ross join us today to illuminate this subject.
Sure. I have in my practice so many clients that come in and they start describing their partner, and lo and behold, I'll use the word like, it sounds like they might be gaslighting you. That sounds like they might be a narcissist. And they say, really? Well, tell me more. And I'm amazed at the number of people that actually don't know what that looks like. And I know that when we're in relationship with someone like that, it's hard to see what's going on because we're in it, but it's pretty easy for me to see on the outside looking in, and it just keeps happening. So I thought, you know what, let's have Ross on who can talk more in depth about this. And so Ross, if you could tell us, what is narcissism? What is it?
Well, that's a great question about, this whole, what is narcissism? Aren't we all narcissistic? I get it all the time. People say, well, I'm a little bit narcissistic and I'm a little bit codependent. And that question was part of the impetus of me writing The Human Magnet Syndrome. I wanted to come up with new definitions that explained what is healthy and what is not. So a person who is all about their own needs for their love, respect, and care, who cannot really and does not want to reciprocate and be mutual, that's a pathological narcissist. And pathological narcissists are selfish, greedy, entitled, and grandiose. So the term, and the person who is all about everyone else, who sacrifices, who gives and expects everyone to reciprocate, but doesn't and gets mad and stays in the relationship, well, that's a codependent. So those are the simple new definitions that really the world needs to know about, because this whole codependency narcissism thing is too unclear, because you can want to take care of yourself and you can focus on yourself. That's not a bad thing.
Right.
So narcissism, from my point of view, is a negative personality trait that is harmful. And codependency is a negative problem that is harmful. So that's kind of how I qualify it.
There's this interesting, maybe self-referential joke. If you go to a party and you're looking around the room and you can't tell who the narcissist is, it's me. I have to ask, though, as here I am as a parent and trying to raise healthy kids. We got to get into the nature-nurture thing. Where does it come from? How do you end up sliding into the negative side of this problem, like the unhealthiness of I want to take care of myself at the expense of everyone else?
Pathological narcissism, which I specifically quantify and qualify as either narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, or antisocial personality disorder, or codependency, which I've changed the name to self-love deficit disorder. Both, all of these disorders come from severe childhood neglect, abandonment, and sometimes abuse, which I term attachment trauma. So when we are looking at what happened to this adult that made them into this pathological narcissist or this person with self-love deficit disorder, it always points to being raised by a parent who was themselves a pathological narcissist, and often another parent who's a codependent. Because as people won't read, or if they know my videos, they go together vis-a-vis the human magnet syndrome. So the difference between the child who was raised by a pathological narcissist who ends up being codependent or self-love deficit disorder, I call it SLDD, or pathologically narcissistic, is how they adapted in their childhood. Because their parent can only think about their own needs. Remember, their parent is a pathological narcissist. If the baby, the toddler, and the child does not figure out a way to be the trophy, to be the extension for the narcissist, to be that type of baby, child, teenager that makes the narcissist feel good, if that child cannot figure that out, he is then triggering the narcissist as like anyone would if they disagree with the narcissist and they experience a narcissistic injury. So the child that can adapt and sacrifice and become invisible and find a way to make their mommy, let's assume the narcissist is a mom, love them, that child adapts into a worldview or a relationship template that I'm only worthwhile and lovable when I sacrifice my own reality and I become what other people need me to become. And that morphs into codependency. The child who can't is the subject of the narcissist's shame and disappointment and anger. That child becomes the bad seed and does not get any attachment experience. So both children suffer attachment trauma, but the attachment trauma is exponentially more harmful and more serious to the child who cannot make the narcissist happy. And that's where we have in any family in which there's a bunch of siblings and one person is an SLD or a codependent, I'll ask them to tell me who's who in your family. And there's only two ways to look at it. There's usually the codependents or SLD siblings, and then there are the narcissistic siblings. And those that are narcissistic were the bad ones.
I feel like you have described a condition. And when I think back to, people who I know couples who have been struggling because they discover that they're in a relationship, maybe potentially abusive relationship with a narcissist. They're struggling to get out of that relationship. That is usually the mode of fixing the problem, is get away from that person, right? It's something that is very challenging to address, to confront a narcissist. Is that your experience? How do you start the process of kind of intervention when you're dealing with a narcissist?
One of the very important processes that unfortunately many, if not most, psychotherapists or people in the mental health field are not aware of or educated on is what exactly is a pathological narcissist. And and a lot of my work is just education. So the very first part of my treatment of SLDs or codependents is to teach them not only what they're like, but how they react to boundaries. And I give them what I call my Surgeon General warning. And of course, I'm neither a surgeon nor a general, but I warn them like a pack of cigarettes. If you do this, bad stuff's going to happen. In other words, the narcissist will not ever handle the codependent's decision to be more self-loving and have more boundaries. So they are going to fight back with ferocity, with tenacity. So it's important to understand that if you want to extricate yourself from a relationship with a narcissist, there is no easy way to do it unless the narcissist feels that it's good for him. And in most cases, they don't, and they attack back. So if we're going to try to extricate ourselves from a relationship, we not only have to understand the human magnet syndrome, but what compels the codependent to stay in the relationship, which is almost like an addiction and a fear of pathological loneliness. That's the magnet that keeps them, the irrational compulsion that keeps you going back. But
so you're saying, excuse me, go ahead. I just want to say, so you're saying they both have that loneliness on the inside, correct?
Oh my gosh, yes.
Yes.
The difference between the codependent and a pathological narcissist is that if I would suggest to a codependent, do you experience pathological loneliness? It's like their shoulders droop and their eyes kind of go down, and they go, and it's a word that resonates all the way to their soul. But if you say the same thing to a narcissist, they're so psychologically damaged they can't get to it consciously.
Right.
But they are so deeply lonely and shame-based, they just can't get to it consciously. So that loneliness, that shame pulls them together because, and I call this relationship math, 1/2 and 1/2 equals 1. A person who is not fully psychologically developed, a codependent, and someone and a narcissist, they need each other to feel whole and to feel happy. So the relationship themselves serves as their ego. And of course, the codependent gets consumed by that.
That is exactly what I see with the narcissist is they drop into shame. They have shame. And I don't see that as much with the codependence, though.
Well, actually,
different. I see the loneliness for sure, but I don't know that maybe there is shame. I see the loneliness and the deep, like you said, and that core, it hits home hard.
Well, someone who's a pathological, see, the issue is a lot of people mistake codependence from narcissist and narcissist from codependence. But if someone is a pathological narcissist and they have a personality disorder, they have a difficulty connecting to the shame. They disassociate from it. Instead of going to the shame, they go to why people make them mad. They do feel shame, and they get lost in it. And they almost drown in it when a horrible consequence befalls them. They get fired, their wife divorces them, their children quit talking to them, and their narcissistic injuries no longer work or protect them. They go into what I call a shame spiral, and they can't withstand it for long, and they come out of it. They can't stay there.
Right.
So my experience is they can't stay there except when they're horribly injured, and then they have to get out of it, and they forget it quickly thereafter.
Yeah. And the narcissist, they can't really, like, I think you just said this, but in my experience of it, I just wanted to hear from what your opinion is. They can't feel their feelings. They can't, like you said, stay with that shame. So when they're in my office, I'll say, so, what are you experiencing right now? What are you feeling? What emotions are coming up? They can't go there. They make it about their wife or their husband. They flip and they go right into the mind and try to blame, and they're out of their feelings. They can't do it. It seems like to me.
It's absolutely true. That is described, as what we call a defense mechanism. That is disassociation. They're so damaged psychologically. They learned. If you think of PTSD, if someone is in the war and they saw their friends get blown up, they will forget that and not want to remember it because it's just too painful. But you can see it still in the way that they act and everyone else. The narcissist's childhood was so horribly damaging, they had to disassociate from it, PTSD, and they can't ever really get back to it because just the memory of it is the memory of how tragically and horribly they were treated. So they can't. It's a red flag when I ask someone, "Can you remember your childhood?" and they say, "Not really." After 13 years old, it doesn't mean they're narcissistic, but it means that they had to disassociate. And that's a clue for me to explore further.
But, the way that you're speaking, and I just want to clarify this for all of the people that listen to this show, and I could be wrong, but I'm hearing you say that it's like this extreme neglect or extreme abuse or extreme is, yeah. I feel like, at least again, with my clients, oftentimes it's just parents that aren't good at affection, or they don't say I love you, and they don't like conflict, so they just sort of are very rigid maybe, and very so they're just not good at interacting with their kids. But the kids were safe and they grew up and they had
Sure.
food on the table, but they didn't interact and feel loved in the way that other kids would have felt loved if they were hugged and told they loved you, and gotten in bed and read bedtime stories. But they might even report that they had good childhood. So I just want to be clear.
Oh, no, I think it's a great question, and the answer is through my continuum of self theory, and that's the one thing that I'm really proud of. Is most everyone wants to talk about is he codependent or is he a narcissist? Mm-hmm. What I did was I created gradations or levels of the person who is self-absorbed or the person who is other-absorbed. And we talked earlier, the codependent is completely other-absorbed, and it's on one side of the continuum. The person who is completely self-absorbed, the pathological narcissist, is on the other side of the continuum. And if you have this 0 point in the middle, that would be this imaginary balance between self and others. But my point is, there are 5 gradations on the others side, which is in its deepest is the codependent, and 5 gradations on the self. So if someone has horribly abusive parents and they are, like what I said, they're going to grow up and be a pathological narcissist. But if they have something like you're saying, then they're going to be somewhere else on the continuum. So the world, everyone fits on the continuum, and it's a constant flow because the human spirit is malleable. Our brains can be rewired, our psyche, our soul. We all can fit somewhere on that continuum. Where that person you're talking about, probably if they're on the narcissistic side and not personality disorder, that means their childhood wasn't horrible, that they had to disassociate. So that's how we describe non-pathological levels of narcissism or non-pathological levels of codependency.
So they may be a 3 out of 5 instead of being a 5 off the chart where they had to disassociate because they were being,
exactly
abused. Okay. I heard this one time from one of my teachers years ago who said that a narcissist can love, but they don't have empathy. Would you agree?
By the way, when I say I don't agree, it doesn't mean I'm disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that I'm correcting what I think is the information that you have.
No. And this is what I'm looking for because I feel like you know this so well. I'm just trying to get really clear again because I sit with some clients that are narcissists and I'm thinking, is there even hope? I mean, I've also heard that it's really hard to help a narcissist because if they can't admit and see and admit that they have narcissism, how can they then heal that? They can't. I mean, if they don't see it, they can't work on it, correct?
Right, and that's where the continuum is helpful. If someone is someone's a -5, they're codependent. If someone's a +5, they have a personality disorder. They're pathologically narcissistic, and there's little hope because you can't work with or help someone heal and solve a problem that they are oblivious to and are so guarded and shielded from. So to your question, can narcissists love and do they have empathy? Now, my answer has upset a lot of people, but they can love and they have empathy. But let's look at what empathy means. Empathy is just simply imagining what other people feel like. If you are in a relationship with someone, the narcissist that they love, and you can't see me, I'm quoting the word love, and their narcissistic needs are always being met, of course, by the codependent who's getting none of her needs met, they love that person. The subjective experience is love. Whereas you think about a sociopath or a psychopath or someone with antisocial personality disorder, they're incapable of that experience. They can't and they don't love. They fake it. The narcissists love people that make them feel good about themselves. It's a very one-sided and empathy. When someone takes care of them and someone is part of their fan base, someone elected them, it's their children, they have empathy but it's empathy that's conditional. So yes, they have empathy, but it's all conditional, it's all situational, and it can be taken away at a moment's notice. So the fact that they have empathy just means it's still about them. Narcissists feel good about themselves when they take care of other people. It makes them feel good. It makes them feel better, but they don't know how to actually be in a reciprocal, mutual relationship. It always has to be about them.
Interesting. So there's hope if you're maybe a 1, 2, or 3 on the narcissist scale, that you can actually then eventually work with yourself enough and then bring yourself to that balance point of being a 0 where you're right in the middle and more healed.
Yeah, just so we're not confusing your listeners, there's hope for anyone who doesn't have a personality disorder.
Gotcha.
And even with a personality disorder, there's hope for those folks, but they have to subject themselves to intensive long-term psychotherapy. Mm-hmm. And then there is some hope, but most don't do that.
So for the listeners that are involved with someone, let's say if they're codependent and they're realizing, oh boy, I think my husband or my wife is a narcissist, give us some next steps that they can do, again, because they're faced with that loneliness, so they don't want to leave, even though that may be the best thing.
What I do is I teach them about what exactly is self-love deficit disorder and what exactly is pathological narcissism. Self-love deficit disorder or codependency, it's just a symptom. It's a symptom of deeper underlying problems of deep pathological loneliness, deep shame, and ultimately about the trauma that you endured as a child. The more my clients learn about why they are an SLD or codependent, the less shame that they have and the more hope that they have. And once they learn that it is because what happened to them and how much they don't love themselves, they have something for the first time in their life to put their hands on to, something to hope for. Mm-hmm. So instead of saying, well, we're going to fix codependency, and codependency is just a bad problem, but if you explain, well, codependency is because of what happened to you as a child and how that perpetuated your whole life by thinking that you're only good when you take care of someone, but in these relationships you feel glued and stuck and terrified of being alone, and you speak those truths, it not only resonates for them, it gives them hope and it gives them something to work on.
I have a final question for you. How many people would you, in general, again, I don't need an exact statistic here, but how many of us actually come out of childhood as healthy children that really had our needs met? And what is your opinion on that?
I think I love that question because it talks about the human condition. We don't have perfect parents. Perfect parents are it's a myth. We have parents that keep trying to do the best thing. And so my definition of a healthy person who falls in the continuum as in the 2 range, a -2 to 0 or +2 to 0, is someone who had parents that unconditionally loved them, that tried their best. And that is the recipe for a healthy adulthood. And healthy adulthood means you have problems. You might need to go to therapy. To me, my definition of healthy and normal is being able to identify your problems, to have the inner motivation to want to overcome them, and to try to overcome them. So I think that 50% or more people would fit in that category that are healthy. And healthy is just is not about being without a problem. As I said, it's about being self-loving enough to solve them.
And what the word that comes up for me when you say that is having the awareness.
Yes.
So many of us lack awareness that there's even anything wrong, that I'm coming home from work and having 4 glasses of wine. And I think that's normal because all my friends are doing it. And I think so many of us lack awareness that, hey, maybe the 4 glasses of wine isn't healthy. Maybe I'm burying something.
Right.
And when we lack that awareness, we're going to just keep drinking and staying within these dysfunctional relationships and, whatever we do to shove down those emotions. But yeah, and I think that so many of us lack that awareness. So,
and it's awareness, but it's also denial and empathy. So you can be an addict, which is different from being a narcissist or a codependent, and it's denial. It's part of the disease. You can be a narcissist, and it's lack of, the empathy is only there for people that make you feel good. So the lack of awareness is probably one step above what the real problem is. is why does someone have a lack of awareness? And that's where you're going to find the problem at.
This is just fascinating, and it's a little bit terrifying too. I'm really interested in hearing a little bit more about your book. You've mentioned the name of the book a number of times in this conversation, and we'll absolutely put a link to that in the show notes so people can jump right to it. And also, you have a fantastically titled webinar coming up. Do you want to share with us a little bit about the work you're doing here?
My book, The Human Magnet Syndrome, Why We Love People Who Hurt Us, explains that codependency is not a problem to fix. It's a problem that is connected to this magnetic force that makes you feel safe, paradoxically safe and comfortable with someone who unconsciously reminds you of the past. If all you know, if you were that child who was raised that love equals being sensitive and empathetic and caring, and as an adult, you are attracted to people that need you, that won't leave you. So the narcissist is attracted to someone who is selfless, who will listen to them, who will take care of them, who will stay around despite their bad habits. So the human magnet syndrome explains not only why these two opposite people come together, like a dance partnership, the leader and the follower both need each other to dance. It explains it from a psychological perspective that makes sense and gives hope to the person with codependency, because, and I've said this thousands of times, you can't solve a problem if you don't understand it. My other work, my codependency cure work, is about what to do and how to solve this problem, the self-love deficit disorder. That's both a trauma issue, a shame issue, a pathological loneliness issue, and an addiction. And it gives people hope. And that's why my videos on YouTube seem to be well viewed, is because people for the first time are hearing not only what this problem is and have it make intuitive sense to them, but the solutions seem to make sense with the problems. To the other, my webinar that I'm doing, it's called Gaslighting is Everywhere. I've come to understand, especially because of the political events, is that gaslighting is deeply embedded in our society, and it's deeply embedded in the codependent narcissist relationship. You can't stay with someone who makes the world all about themselves and ignores you unless somehow you bought into some narrative that you don't deserve it or there's something wrong with you. And that's the gaslighting that we see in these relationships. And it's the gaslighting that reduces someone to just an object of pleasure to someone else.
When is this webinar available? Where would you like people to go to learn more about it?
All of my whether it's my book or my training seminars, and this webinar is at advancedclinicaltrainers.com. advancedclinicaltrainers.com. And each one of my seminars are fully described, and I think a lot of people will get the information that they need, whether they're a therapist or they're just a layman, because all my work is written and produced for both groups.
Awesome. Well, gosh, Ross, I could spend 3 or 4 hours talking to you. I love this. You're speaking my language. I love all of this. Love it, love it, love it.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are delighted to have you again. Everybody listening, please just swipe up in your podcast device and you will find all the links to all of the programs that Ross has talked about. You can find the book. You can find the webinar, Gaslighting is Everywhere. That webinar is actually coming right up. When you hear this, you will only have a couple of days. It's February 25th. So, hurry. Tap that link, get over there and register. It looks like you can learn a lot, and it is available for clinicians. You can get CEUs for it. Thank you so much, Ross Rosenberg.
Thank you.
On behalf of Ross and Michelle Chalfant, I'm Pete Wright. Thank you, everybody, for your time and attention, and we will catch you next week right here, sitting right here in the adult chair.